Thank you. Thank you.
Also, when you get tired of studying, you can play.
Well, yeah. I started sitting on it for a while. I needed to air it up and put sitting on it. So that's good where the little kids will come in and, oh, you know, the great ball. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You got a heater on in here?
Why?
Some kind of electronic. I thought it was. A heater, but it's not.
You're right. You may be right.
You doing okay?
I may have left it.
No. No, no.
Yeah, I
it's
do.
sad.
By the way, I may not be here Sunday.
Nothing in there.
Right. I'm sorry. Sorry.
It's all right. She lived a lovely, good life.
I know she did. She was over 100, is that about right?
Yeah, she was 4 months shy of 102.
Yeah. That's pretty remarkable, really. I mean, she's had her senses too most of the time, hadn't she?
Oh yeah. She was a strong woman. As of right now, I keep telling myself it's not even happened until I see it.
Well, that's what you like to think. Because in your mind's eye, you can still see things pretty vivid. I can still see things, you know, that Mother did, and she's been dead quite a while. Hi.
Caught you dozing there, Pat.
Oh, you thought it was, huh? My eyes closed.
Steph, what's up?
Nothing much. How are you?
Doing alright. I don't know what it is, but Wednesday nights are boogers for me, man.
You worked all
I know what
day.
it is for me.
I'm just lazy, that's all.
Just lazy.
Fat and lazy, both. I made it, though. I tell you, once I get here, I'm so glad I'm here. Sometimes, Mama,
Sometimes you don't know if you're gonna make it or not, huh?
forgive me, Lord, for saying that. That's the truth.
I ain't gonna lie, sometimes on Thursdays it's hard to make it to work on time with as early as I have to get up.
Well, I better not say anything. I have a hard time getting out of bed.
You do well, Pat. You do real well.
Hmm. How's your mama's back?
Mine?
Yeah, I talked to Leanne this afternoon.
She's doing all right. You know, she has her the cold weather. She don't like the cold weather that well.
Well, I think anybody does that has,
Back surgery and stuff.
yes.
Hello, Isaac. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, how are you?
Ron,
Hey,
nice
I
to see
think
you,
you doing
man.
all right?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, I'm glad you're here.
Hi, Stephanie, how you doing?
Hi?
I had 2 cookies for you.
You all right?
The other night at the party. You told me to have 2
Oh,
cookies.
yeah, well, good. All right. Were they good?
They were good.
Hello, Pat.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm good, how
Is
are
that
you?
all you had?
No,
Just the
no.
egg.
Life is very,
Huh?
just your part is very
Chicken. You know,
Yeah.
for first time I ever ate, I guess they call it egg squash.
No.
I thought it was rotten potatoes.
Egg squash?
Or something that Billy.
I've never
Yeah.
heard of egg squash.
Well, I don't know what she called it, man, but it wasn't potatoes. But it was the first time I
You
ever
sure it
ate
wasn't
it.
eggplant?
Do you know who it is?
Eggplant, maybe?
Yeah, there it
Eggplant?
is.
Oh, okay.
And
Egg
Cal's
squash.
wife, she made it. She made it, and it looked like it was rotted potatoes to me.
Yeah.
You know? And
Okay.
I said, man, all they needed was a little salt, and it'd have been off the hook. And I said,
like
what
eggplant.
potatoes?
You know what you can do with that stuff?
Throw it away.
Well, a lot of people would, yes.
Oh, my bad.
Because the first time I ever made it, I didn't know how to make it, and I made eggplant parmesan,
Right.
which is supposed to be real good, because Italian restaurants have it.
Mm-hmm.
But the secret to eggplant, the big eggplant,
Right.
is first off you peel them, and then you slice them about that thick, and you put them on a screen, and you put salt all over them. The salt pulls out the water and the bitterness, and then after you let it sit there for a little while, then you rinse all that salt off.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can prepare it as eggplant parmesan but something else I like to do is cut it up in little small 1/2 inch to 1 inch squares
Uh-huh.
and put some coating on it like you would okra
Right.
and fry it just like you would okra. And it's good.
Yeah, because I always mentioned with a little salt flavor.
I know.
It
I was like,
real
wasn't that
good.
mom's
Yeah.
recipe?
But I guess that's normal, isn't it?
Well, that's what we're gonna say. He made it.
Yeah, it's my first
He said he
time,
liked
so I
it.
guess I have to
He just
eat that
didn't
with
give
mom
credit
now.
where credit was due. He just like, he
Put a
probably
little
had
cheese
enough.
on there and I
Yeah.
put candy potatoes.
No, they came from you.
Well, the clock on the wall there says 2 minutes after, and I don't have my cell phone with me, and I don't have my watch with me, so I'm assuming that clock's right, and I'm wrong. So we're going to finish up chapter 36 tonight, and we're at verse 31 is where we are, and then we'll get into chapter 37. Jensen won't be here tonight because he's sick, and Jeremiah's sick, Vera Blackburn's sick. And of course, if you didn't get it, I sent a message out yesterday. My mother-in-law passed away yesterday morning at 11 o'clock. So we'll have a graveside service for her Saturday at 11 a.m. And of course, the sad thing and the ironic thing is I buried my dad on December 17th. I buried my dad's father on December 16th. I buried my mother 2 days after Christmas. And now we're going to bury my mother-in-law on the 16th. So I take it back. I buried my father's father on the 18th, December 18th. So December's not a good month when it comes to those things. So,
I thought they
but,
were all Christians.
No.
well, you know, that's up to God.
Yeah,
So.
that's true.
All we can do is work out our own salvation.
And I look forward to
Uh,
Jesus.
Let's go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. Our most loving Heavenly Father, we thank Thee so much for this day and for the many blessings You've given us. We thank Thee for the time we can come together to be an encouragement to one another, to be able to study Thy Word without fear of persecution. We ask, Father, that You'd be with our members who have physical ailments, that they might be restored to their health, and use us as instruments that we might reach out and help in any way we can. And we ask, Father, that You would be with the Tidwell family as they mourn the loss of their mother, that they might be comforted, and we ask that You would use us, that we might say the right words to be comforting to them. We ask also, Father, that You continue to be with us as Christians, that we might always do those things, be honorable to Thee, that we would never bring any shame or reproach upon Thee or upon the church. And we're thankful for the privilege of being able to study Thy Word in the book of Genesis, and we ask that You would be with us, that we might apply the things You want us to know into our lives, so that we might be able to give a ready answer to anyone who would challenge Your authority. These things we ask in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen.
Are we tardy if we're in the doorway?
Are you what?
Are we tardy if we're in the doorway?
You know, when I went to college and everything, you always
Had to be in your seat?
yeah, but you gave the professor 10 minutes, so I'll give
Pretty
you
much
10
what they
minutes.
say at school.
Well, I'll go back out.
Cal, I have you down for song leading tonight. Okay.
I'll get some down.
Maybe
How are you?
your book.
Boy, I counted it.
Let's go
You
there.
got us over
I bet
there.
the teacher didn't.
No.
Oh, excuse me.
Record
Or the
from
opposite.
there they are. We're on now. Thanks, John. Okay, we're in Genesis 36th chapter. We're going to finish the 36th chapter. We're going to begin at verse 31 tonight, and then we'll look at verse 31, and then we'll look at just a couple of other additional comments. In your handout, it's on page 91. It's capital letter H is where we are in your handout. So, Isaac, let's just begin with you. Read verse 31 for me. And why don't you read, let's see here. No, let's just read 31, because we get into some names there at the beginning of verse 32, and I don't want
I appreciate that.
to... You're welcome.
Now these were the kings who reigned in the land of Edom, before any king reigned over the children of Israel.
All right, so what we're going to see here in the latter part of chapter 36 is the idea that, as I have up there, the presence of evil influences begin to develop long before their effects are felt on God's people. And here's the idea. If you look at your handout and everything, one of the things that points out here is kings were forming all around the nation of Israel. And I didn't put it up there, but Ron, would you turn to 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verses 5 and 6 for me, please? What we're going to see is the people of Israel would desire a king, and we know that, and that's what 1 Samuel tells us, that they would desire a king like the nations around them. And so, Ron, when you get turned over there, Moses himself also spoke of the time when Israel would have a king, and we'll look at Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 through 20. Stephanie, you can be turning there. Ron, you have that?
1 Samuel 8 and what verses?
Verses 5 and 6, please. Did I not write the right one down?
Well, you get it there. I'm just starting in mid-sentence here. Samuel said that
Yeah.
the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel, Ramah, and said to him, the elders said to Samuel, look, you are old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord.
So that's what 1 Samuel's saying, is that one day they would desire a king like the nations around them. And of course in Deuteronomy, Moses said the same thing in Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 through 20. Stephanie, you want to read that?
When you come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and possess it and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me. You shall surely set a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses, one from among your brethren you shall set as king over you. You may not set a foreigner over you, who is not your brother. But he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the king... I just lost my place. Oh, nor cause the people, I don't know where I got king, to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. Also it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this law in a book, from the one before the priest, the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, and that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel.
Okay. In all of that and everything, what we see here is what Moses is saying is that there would be a time when Israel would have a king. And so, sure enough, in 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 5 and 6, they're asking for that. But clearly, there's an influence around them, and that's what I'm talking about here. The presence of evil influences begin to develop long before their effects are felt on God's. You've heard me say before, and I know John said it, that if you look today, if something starts in the denominational world, within 5 years you will find it somewhere in the Lord's church. And that's not a good thing, but it's just evil influences do this. And this is what Numbers 20:14 is kind of alluding to, is there were kings in Edom during Moses' life, and these people saw this. Look at Numbers 20, verse 14, John.
And Moses sent messengers from Kadesh unto the king of Edom, thus saith thy brother Israel, thou knowest all the travel that hath befallen us.
All right, so when you're surrounded by evil influences, sometimes you will yield to those evil influences, and we have to constantly guard ourselves and ensure that we keep ourselves separated from the world, from these evil influences. Any comments on chapter 36?
Well, I found it interesting that Esau's children are named, different ones of them are named as chief.
Yes.
So apparently, chief is designation for somebody like Abraham or Jacob or Isaac, when they, or Israel, as he's called, because he has a band of people that are traveling with him. So he's in control of that.
Yeah.
Now, the kings are different. They have land. These others are nomadic in nature.
Right.
So they're called chiefs. But the kings all have a city that they're reigning over.
Yes.
So that appears to be the big difference between the two.
Yeah. And that's a good point, and I appreciate you bringing it out. I didn't write anything down for the latter verses because of basically what you're saying there. A lot of names there, and basically what we're talking about is evil influences and everything.
I didn't do any research on them, but I tried figuring out the names.
Yeah.
Who's related to who and everything else. I didn't see it, but I saw a lot of names, apparently like Beor and others, that later on you see these same names being used again.
Yes, yes. Exactly right. All right. No, I may have, I'm going to turn this around because I did not check this after you turned on the recording. That works. Okay. So now we're going to get into chapter 37, and this is page 92 of your handout. Victor Eskew gives it the title, as I have up there, Joseph from loved son to lowly slave, and he has several titles that I could have chosen from. He could have chosen Joseph's Road to Egypt, The Providence Turns Against Joseph, The End of Wrath or Sorrow, the innocent suffer, and Joseph gets a bad rap. And he uses Genesis 37 verses 19 and 20 as the key verse. And he says that this verse reveals the anger that Joseph's brothers had toward him, especially because of his dreams. It also shows the end of anger, death, and deception. And he says, note, fortunately, this anger was ultimately tempered. So, as we look at chapter 37 then, as the privileged son of the favorite wife. Who was the favorite wife?
Rebecca.
Who?
Rebecca.
Rebecca, yes. Joseph is lavished with gifts and attention until he is so hated that his brothers stop just short of killing him and they sell him into slavery. God uses this, their wickedness, to develop the character of Joseph then, as he rises in power to the end that Egypt is well prepared for the famine that would come. And we'll look at that as we continue this study and everything. Ultimately, though, the family reunites, and at the invitation of Joseph and Pharaoh, they move into Goshen, where God will grow this family into a nation. I've always wondered about that, because Goshen was some prime property in Egypt, but yet the Pharaoh allowed the Israelites to go into Goshen. And we'll see that too, as to how Joseph, and I'll use this word, manipulated that to get his people into this great area.
Well, I think the big thing is it was suited for the raising of cattle and that
Yes.
type of stuff.
Yes.
And I don't think the rest of the people in Egypt really desired that particular property. But Joseph saw that that was exactly what his people were going to need to get down there.
Right.
So,
Exactly right. So the structure of the Joseph cycle then can be broken down into several ways, which shows the literary richness of this particular section of the book of Genesis. And that begins, let's read verses 1 and 2. Pat, would you like to read that for me, please?
Sure. 37?
Yes.
Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and a lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them, to his father.
Okay. Now in your handout, this is page 92, capital letter A and capital letter B and C. Deals with verses 1 and 2. 1 and 2, as I have up there, sets forth a clear distinction between the land of Esau, Edom, and the land in which Jacob dwelled, which was Canaan. After an entire lifetime away from the promised land, Jacob has now returned to stay. With his father having died, Jacob had now entered upon his father's inheritance, and he carries on the patriarchal pilgrim, which was a life in Canaan. The generations of Jacob prepares us to hear the story of Jacob's sons then. And Jacob will in turn live with Joseph the last 17 years of his life. Let's go to Genesis 47, verse 28 that I have up there. Kathy, you had that?
And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years.
And that just tells us that he lived the last 17 years of his life with Joseph. The family has been reunited now. And we'll see as the history goes and everything. This was a time where Jacob wasn't sure that Joseph would ever receive him back and everything. But it has a wonderful ending to the story and everything. Not all of the brothers, as we see here in verses 1 and 2, were present at this point. We may speculate that as the sons of the concubines, they were given the harder work, and they were assigned the favorite son as a helper. Now that's just subjection and everything. We don't know that that's true, But I can only imagine that Jacob would have more favor towards his sons of his two wives than he would the sons of the concubines. So Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Some might say, well, he was a tattletale. Because there are two possible interpretations to this passage. First, Joseph may have been simply reporting back to his father as part of an assigned duty. Look down at verse 14, if you will. Verse 14 says, Then he said to him, Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now, that verse would suggest that he just coming back with a report of what his assignment was, okay? But if so, his first duty was to his father, and reporting their deeds was wholly appropriate in this situation. But the alternative interpretation is suggested by the word used, okay? Look again at verse 2, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought to a bad report of them to his father. And you go back to that verse 14, and there's that word used there. The Hebrew word for used, or Hebrew used for report, denotes news slanted to damage the victim, which would suggest maybe a tattletale here. It concludes by referring to Joseph as a pestering tattletale, a little brother. Now, it may be, it may not be. But those are two possibilities of this verse. Yes, John?
He's quite a bit younger than the others, right?
He was, yes. He was a lot younger.
He might be a little spoiled.
Obviously, because he was the son of the favorite wife. And so you're exactly right. Any other comments on verses 1 and 2? All right, look at verses 3 and 4 then. Florence, you want to read that?
Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of the old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that his father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him.
So this goes to what you were saying, Pat. He somewhat spoiled here. Parental favoritism can cause conflict within the home. We saw this earlier in Genesis with Esau and Jacob. So should we expect any less from a man who learned parental favoritism from childhood? And had shown favoritism among his 4 wives. So it is noteworthy then that this comment is made on the heels of Joseph reporting to his brothers, which would again support the idea that maybe he was just tattling on his brothers, the sons of the concubines. The reason given, though, however, is surprising, because Jacob did not love Joseph the most because he had loved Rachel more than Leah. However, this report is strange when you think about it, because Benjamin was really the final son, wasn't he? Not Joseph. And in the truest sense then, Benjamin was the son of the old age, not Joseph.
Yeah, but she died bearing Benjamin.
She died bearing Benjamin. Of course, though, Joseph's birth to Jacob by Rachel is the only instance of a birthing incident involving Rachel that has a happy ending. It wasn't a happy ending with Benjamin. Okay? Archaeological discoveries of Mesopotamian artwork have revealed that many such long-sleeved robes were multicolored. The point of the test, however, seems to indicate the status it gave Joseph rather than the appearance of the robe. And thus, this is why we have it mentioned here. Jacob's favoritism resulted in family strife. And if favoritism was not enough, the gift has promoted Joseph from being a helper in the field to being the supervisor of his older brothers in the field. So their hatred then is typically understood as being directed toward Joseph, which may well be the case. And because of that, one must wonder, however, if their hatred is also in part directed towards their father, the one who showered Joseph with gifts and with love. They had already shown their relationship with their father to be weak. Go back to Genesis chapter 34. And yeah, I did put it up. Verses 30 and 31, Donna.
Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And my men, being few in number, they will gather together against me and attack me, and I will be destroyed, I and my household." But they said, "Should we treat our sister as a harlot?"
So their later revenge then on Joseph to somewhat had Jacob as a clear target when you think about it. And you see that phrase in verses 4 where in the latter part says they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Shalom, or peace, was the common greeting. And this verse may indicate that the brothers would not even greet Joseph, which would suggest that maybe they hated him so much, or they were so jealous of him that they could only think evil of him. Any thoughts through verse 4?
Well, didn't they hate him for his dreams too?
Yes, yes. Pat.
It's just as both of them had very strong feelings, because here was Joseph being favored so strongly. Joseph didn't, that changed who Joseph was. He enjoyed all that attention and that love that he got, to the point he couldn't see what he was doing to his brothers. He didn't, you know, he was innocent in it, but it's a fact of nature that kids do this and parents do this, and they don't see it. Someone needs to tell them what they're doing to their children
Yeah.
and the family dynamics.
That's why Stephanie's personality is the way it is today, because when she was growing up, she always said, "You always did love Irvin more than me."
You did. I still say that.
You know, it happens in every family.
It does. It does.
But this came to nearly murder. It got so intense.
Oh, yes.
And they couldn't see it. I don't think the older brothers could see how bad it was getting.
But it was all Jacob's fault.
It was
Jacob's fault.
It was Jacob's fault.
That's my point. This was intoxicating. I don't really blame it on Joseph, but yet he sure was wallowing in it. I mean, he enjoyed it. Who wouldn't?
Oh, yeah. And I would suggest it's also his mother, Rachel's fault, too.
Oh, definitely. She's a stinker.
And because, I mean, this was the first son that she had for Jacob, and that was the one thing she wanted most of all, was to have a son for her husband, because she was jealous of Leah. And Lily probably had some hate for Leah, because Leah was having boys and she wasn't having anything, and then finally she had Joseph. So there's some animosity there on both the mother and the father. Yes, John?
Her having a son stopped all the sons being born except for hers.
Yes. Yes, very true. Good point. All right, let's look at verses 5 through 11 then. Cal, you want to read that for us, please?
Then Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. And he said to them, "Please listen to this dream which I have had. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and stood erect. And behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf." How far do you want me to
go? Through 11.
Then his brothers said to him, "Are you actually going to reign over us? Or are you really going to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Now he had still another dream, and related it to his brothers, and said, "Lo, I have had still another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." And he related it to his father and to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and says, What is this dream that you have had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept saying in his mind.
Okay. In your handout on page 92, it's capital letter F, which has Joseph dreamed 2 dreams. And this goes to what you were talking about, Pat. Joseph indeed dreamed 2 dreams, and the account of the dreams coming at the outset makes God, not Joseph, the hero of the story. It is not a tale of human success, but a tale of divine sovereignty. Why would Joseph tell his brothers of this dream, though?
It kind of crossed my mind. Why did he tell them that?
Well,
They were jealous of him? Of course, later on it kind of explained, but I don't.
let me suggest 3 potential reasons, okay?
He was unconscious.
The first one is he may have thought that as the favorite he was untouchable and sought to rub it in. That's certainly a possibility. The second one is that he may have been naive and not realized that his brothers hated him or what relating to the dream would do to anger them. And the third possibility is he may have merely been excited and not realized the extent of their hatred toward him, though that they would share in. He thought they would share in his excitement over these 2 dreams.
He was very naive.
How old was he at this time?
17.
17 years old.
It was number 1.
This is about the age that a teenager thinks they know more than mom and dad. And he was very braggadocious, if you will. So what happened with these dreams then? In reality, what really happened is their hatred intensified because of the dreams, didn't it? And Joseph's dreams could only be interpreted as him having an unequivocal preeminence over his brothers. And this is the point that his brothers did not miss. Go back and look at verse 8 again. It says, "Then his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words." Some have thought or have sought to make the binding of the sheaves specifically prophetic, as Joseph was in charge of the food supply when the brothers would later bow to him in Genesis chapter 42, verse 6 and following verses, okay? But let me suggest to you that if you interpret that, it's a stretch. Okay? Yes, John?
How much time from the time of the dreams till he was sold into slavery? 17 when he was sold into slavery, but it don't say he was 17 when he had the dreams.
No, it doesn't. But the time, I mean, there wasn't much distance between these 2 times.
Quite a bit happened in between them.
A lot happened in between there.
Starts when he's 17, starts talking about him.
Yes, it starts when he's 17. And I think, I mean, it probably happened within that year. But I'll go back and do some researching on that. So anyway, these dreams that Joseph had and everything, the brothers refused to believe that they would ever bow down before Joseph. And you can understand that. And because of that, they hated him even more, because in their mind he was a young 17-year-old saying to his older brothers, "You're going to bow down to me." And that's just not going to happen. So Joseph dreamed another dream then, and again told his brothers. Caution and discretion should have taught Joseph to keep silence after his first dream telling his brothers, but no, 17 years old, he just couldn't learn. So he must have noticed how the former dream had displeased them. This dream was essentially the same, though there was a different scene, and there were 2 added elements to this dream. Without any explanation, Jacob realized immediately the implication of this added the added characters in this dream. Who were the added characters? His parents, yeah.
Representing his parents.
His parents. So this rebuke is not intended to be understood as a mild one then. The word used indicates screaming or sharp rebuke. The emphasis in Jacob's rebuke was most likely on the part of him and Joseph's mother bowing, and less on the brothers bowing, though so much is not said. There is some question, though, as to who is intended by your mother. Because it was the previous chapter we read that she died in childbirth, wasn't it? So some would suggest that it was Rachel.
Well, is Benjamin been born already at this point?
If we take in literal order, chapter 36 and 37, then Benjamin would be born already and Rachel would be dead. If we take it literally in that order, okay? The more sensible answer is that it referred to Leah in this case instead of Rachel. The matriarch of the family. And to a lesser degree of probability, it could refer to Bilhah, Rachel's handmaiden or concubine to Jacob. If she had taken over any of the mother's duties at her death. So it's not referring to Rachel, but probably Leah would be my suggestion.
Should be number one wife now.
Yeah, yes. So his dreams were a recognized means of revelation, a medium which Jacob had personal experience with. Jacob's response was with something of an open mind and humility in spite of the sharp rebuke. But even Jacob was not, he didn't have a pleasant feeling towards these dreams, towards what Joseph said. You're going to bow down to me? The father's not going to bow down to the son. So, kind of interesting. Yes?
What do you think he meant when he said he will keep it in his mind? When Jacob said, at the end of that verse where he said, well...
Kept the matter in his mind?
Mean that he won't forget it, or because he's had prior experience himself, he might not have an opinion about it or be for sure about it, or what do you think they're suggesting?
Well, it could be a little bit of both. I mean, first off, the two words "in mind" is in italics, so they've been added. Okay, one from the original manuscripts, but he kept the matter, so it only seems natural that two words "in mind" would be added. And so the idea here is that while Jacob didn't agree with it, he certainly wasn't going to dismiss this idea because he was familiar with dreams himself. He had dreams. And these dreams came from God, and he knew that if indeed these dreams came from God, that there was something to it. Would be my suggestion. Anybody else have any thoughts on it? Yes, John.
James says, but his father, but his father observed the saying.
Observe the saying? Okay.
It's not italicized, it's all in regular.
Yeah. And this would be the same thing here. If I stopped with the, but his father kept the matter, which would be the same thing, observe the saying. So, any other thoughts?
Well, Mary treasured certain things that she was told by the angel. Remember those things. She remembered it. And as they would be fulfilled, she could recognize what was going on. I think the same thing here. We've all had our kids have said things at different times that kind of struck us, and we thought about that. And then later on, probably we might see that they said that one day they would do something, and then we don't think it's likely, but then one day they end up doing it.
Yeah, okay? Exactly right. Yeah. Any other thoughts? All right, let's look then at the map here, just showing you where all this is taking place. They were down here in Hebron. They went back up to Shechem. And this area here is where we're talking about, okay? All right, let's look at verses 12 through 14. Billy, you want to read that for me, please? Chapter 37, verses 12 through 14.
Yes. Then his brothers went to feed their flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, Here am I. Then he said to him, Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron and went to Shechem.
All right. Now, in your handout on page 93, this is capital letter G and capital letter H is what we're looking at. Joseph, indeed, was an obedient son to his father. We learned later that this is not only the concubine's sons, as we saw in verse 2, but here Leah's sons are there as well. I didn't put it up there, but look at verses 21 and 22, if you will. Here it says, But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said to them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to their father. And then we go down to verse 26, and verse 26 says, So Judah said to his brothers, What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? So we see here that the other brothers were there as well. It wasn't just the concubine's son at this time. Now, it may have been a little bit different scene, okay? Because here we look at 12 through 14, and Jacob has sent Joseph out to his brothers to see how they're doing, to make sure everything's okay. So it is surprising that they would pasture their flock near Shechem, given the family history there that we saw back in chapter 34. We cannot be sure why this land was chosen. However, there are various suggestions that have been made. And one simple suggestion is that they were using the plot of land which Jacob still owned. We know that because we go to Genesis 33, verse 19. Isaac, I guess we're back up to you.
And he bought the parcel of the land, where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money.
Okay. So Jacob still owned this land. Look at John 4 and verse 5, Ron.
He came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph.
So this is possibly why they were up in that area. Because Joseph has shown himself to be a reliable source, Jacob now sends him to make sure that all is well with the flock. The journey from Hebron to Shechem is about 50 miles. If you go back to this map here, it's just about 50 miles distance between the two. The continued journey to Dothan in verse 17, which reads, And the man said, They had departed from here, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. This would be another 15 miles further north, if you would, okay?
It's interesting, Shechem, who's got the land now? Shechem. They killed all the men. They took all the women and children captive for whatever they did with them, okay?
Yeah.
So they go back up to the old stomping grounds there. Nobody wants to mess with them, okay? So that's, and then they probably, after they had grazed their flocks, because they got to keep, when you got as many flocks as they had, you have to keep them moving because you run out of feed.
Exactly
so
right.
Then they decided to go on up toward Dothan.
And sheep, if you know anything about sheep, unlike cattle will graze grass, and cattle will leave grass up where it will come back pretty quickly. But sheep, they will graze the grass down to the ground. I mean, there's basically nothing there. If you leave them there, you've got to keep them moving. And this is what they were doing. They were keeping them moving in this case. Any other thoughts through verse 14? All right, look verses 15 through 17 then. And Stephanie, you want to read that?
Now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What are you seeking? So he said, I am seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they are feeding their flocks. And the man said, They have departed from here, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan.
So you see my heading there, and all you ladies will agree with that, you know.
That's so true.
Man always has a problem asking for directions. And I finally figured out why the children wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, because the men refused to ask for directions.
There's a few that will.
In your handout,
When you know where you're going, you don't need to ask for directions.
You know you've turned yourself around several times?
you may go around the block 15 times, but you still know where you're going, right? You just don't know how to get there.
I'm not lost. That place is lost. I know exactly where I am, but that place is lost.
Yeah. Your handout is capital letter I and capital letter J. And so, as I say there, it should not be considered odd that a stranger would at once know who Joseph's brothers were after the Dinah incident that Cal was alluding to a while ago. Because everyone in the countryside at this time would know who these people are. Some have seen a connection between the unnamed man and the unnamed man of Jabbok. In Genesis 32, verses 24 through 32. John, that's a fairly long reading. You want to read it?
I'll try it.
Okay.
And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the break of day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince thou hast power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved.
Okay, let's stop right there. We don't really need to read the other two verses to get the full picture here, and we'll continue this study next week. But the idea is that some see this connection here of this individual, this unnamed man here, as the same unnamed man of Jabbok that we're talking about here. And I don't know if that's true, but not only did this man know the brothers, it seems as if he was assigned a specific task of keeping an eye on them while they were in the area. And this very well could have been God's providence here to keep an eye on these individuals. So anyway, we'll continue the discussion next week, and we'll finish chapter 37 next week. I appreciate your comments tonight.